Welcome back to another episode of Credentialed alongside Justine Fernandez. I'm Jillian Mealy, and this episode is part two from what we talked about last week, and that is about the power of storytelling through the eyes of someone who lost part of their business. Jeff Smith from Hourglass Winery in Calistoga, California joins us once again. Let's continue.
This speaks to my joke with who I was talking to. Like, no one in their right mind would write a sales and marketing plan that involved burning your winery down to promote the winery. And of course, you would never do that. But that is a powerful piece. It's a powerful story, right? It's very dramatic on so many different levels. And so the silver linings in this, in some respects, are exactly what happened. You reaching out and saying, "Oh my God, how can we help you? Can telling your story help you or help others or whatever?" And the answer is absolutely. First of all, there's a cathartic thing about just being able to speak your truth, right? And talk to people about what happened. So there's that emotional side of it, but then there's the sort of the practical sides of it, that from a branding standpoint, small little businesses don't have big megaphones. We don't have big channels to, shout our stories from. And when we get those opportunities, they do move the needle. And people responded to the loss of the winery in profound ways. And so people who knew about it it became actually a little overwhelming. So here we are, our infrastructure is absolutely, burned to the ground. And then now there's this flood of support and everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to do something for you. And the love was incredible. And we felt that from our immediate community, from our, broader community. And there were times when people were able to help in very meaningful ways. A bunch of our vintner friends knew that we didn't have a place to taste, and that's our life's blood, being able to keep the business afloat. And so, our vintner friends said, "Hey, come do your tastings at our winery. Use our wine, our facilities, and bring your people here." And so, for almost a year and a half after the fire, we were doing offsite tasting at other friends' wineries, and so that kind of stuff was insanely helpful. And then for those people who didn't know about Hourglass, now all of a sudden, we have this worldwide megaphone that was going on. And it was you guys, it was Wall Street Journal, it was, all the wine publications, it was ABC News and NBC News and everybody. I mean, it was such a worldwide story. And we were the first winery to go down and probably the most recognizable winery to go down. And so it became, we were sort of the go-to for the soundbite. And I don't know how many, eyeballs saw us out there, but there were a ton of people who saw us that didn't know anything about us. And all of a sudden we're getting calls from people all over the world saying, "Hey, we want to buy your wine. We want to help you. We want to, your story was, really resonated with us, and we want to help." And so they did. And that was pretty cool.
And Justine, I know you have a question. I just want to pop in on just piggybacking off that real quick, a follow-up. What would your advice be then to small business owners who don't have that megaphone then, who I hope through this they can realize the importance of still trying to get your story out there, still telling your story, no matter how small or large that megaphone may be?
Yeah, we started, listen, we've grown into a pretty recognizable business. And Napa Valley is a pretty recognizable place. And so we have been able to take advantage of that. But we didn't start that way. We started as a small little, hillside vineyard in, St. Helena. Then we didn't have a lot to work from. And so it was, to me, at the end of the day, it was the quality of the story of our invention. So how did Hourglass become a thing? And we were incredibly lucky that we had a compelling, authentic story to begin with. My family moved here in the early 60s before a lot of people moved here, that my dad had bought this property on a whim, that property would go on to become, one of the marquee vineyard sites of Napa Valley and really of the world, frankly. These are all incredibly lucky things that we have to draw from. So I was gifted quite a few story assets that I was able to organize and then work with. But it was one story at a time. It was, all these little businesses that start up are almost always started in a viral capacity. So if I was starting up a business today, I would want to make sure that I have a differentiating story, a differentiating point of view, that the story has to resonate. There's got to be what we refer to as kind of emotional stickiness. You gotta have something that's going to resonate. So it has to be unique and it has to be authentic. The word authenticity gets thrown around kind of a lot in branding circles and so forth. It's maybe a little overplayed, but it's still really powerful and really true. Like, you have to have an authentic point of view. I think you can't be riding on somebody else's story. You got to have your own. And if you have your own and you can create a compelling angle to it, and then you just keep telling it and telling it and telling it, one person at a time, until you catch fire. And the advantage is now that we didn't have when we started, is social media. And social media has an important role to play in all of this. I look at social media as a big megaphone. So it's not, you have to have two things to make social media work right. You can't just be doing social media to do social media. That's, I think, the wrong approach. And I think a lot of people made the mistake of misunderstanding social media as being kind of a content thing. It's not. It's like you have to create the content. Social media is just the vehicle, the distribution vehicle. So if you have compelling original content and compelling original aesthetics, and you can work those into using social media as a vehicle to be your megaphone, then you can actually do some amazing things with it. So I would say, and this is kind of ironic for me to be the one saying this, because I'm not a social media practitioner. I don't have a social media account. I don't have
value in it.
It's powerful. I mean, and if it's done right, and we actually didn't do it for many years because I knew the power of it, and I knew that if we didn't do it right, it would be a megaphone in the wrong direction. And so it's not until very recently, the last few years, that we've really begun to understand it and figure it out. And once you do, then it can be a really powerful thing.
Jeff, and with that in mind, we know there's a number of trends surrounding the wine industry. It's no secret we have an aging population, so a lot of wine companies are trying to think about how do we get younger wine consumers in the door. And there's a lot of competition. We saw the rapid expansion of those seltzer type drinks on the market right around that 2020 timeframe. How are you approaching that as a business?
Yeah, this is a great question. We spend an awful lot of time thinking about this. I just turned 60, so
Happy birthday!
thank you. We've been doing this a while, and the disciplines that we used when we first launched are different than what we need now. And so adaptation becomes a really important survival skill. And so we need to adapt to a younger consumer. And we saw this 20 years ago. Whereas so we were birthed out of what became known as the cult wine movement. So this is a small movement that started to happen in the early 90s. And there was a paradigm shift in the way that wine was being made. And I won't go into all of the backstory on how and why. If anybody's curious about it, you can come to the winery and I'll talk your ear off about it. But the cult wine movement was really a bunch of small growers who decided that they were going to launch their own brands instead of sell their grapes to bigger wineries. And so there were a number of techniques that they used to create cachet. And so they raised the prices really high and they kept their scale really small. And they created this intensity of, and they took the quality way up. So now all of a sudden the wine reviewers start writing about this change in qualitative style in Napa. And here's Napa like now stepping to the top of the qualitative scale, and it's driven by these small little producers that are making a teeny amount of it. And then all of a sudden, this kind of feeding frenzy starts to come up. And I think a lot of those wineries created what I refer to as kind of an Oz marketing style, which is don't let people behind the curtain. Don't, keep people on the outside, and let the mystique of that kind of drive its own desire and so forth. And so that Oz marketing was the core center of the cult wine movement. Many years ago, I looked at that and I said, that's got its place, but I don't know that that's gonna be the driving energy that's gonna take you through generations. And I said, no, I think we need to do the reverse. I think we need to flip this around. And instead of keeping people on the other side of the curtain, I think we need to blow the curtain open and invite people in, because I do think that people want to understand how the sausage is made. They want to, you got to be careful about how much technical stuff you drop in their lap, but I think that people really they want to know that it's the real deal, right? And so the next generation coming up, if you look at our buying demographic now, about 65% of our customer base is between 35 and 45, which is astounding when you look at like wineries of ours. Most, our brands were built on baby boomers. I'm the tail end of the baby boomer generation, and that's what built the cult wine movement. Well, that's not what the engine is moving forward. And so if you haven't pivoted, you need to do that soon, because it takes time. So how do you pivot is the big question. And so we used storytelling, we used aesthetics, we used music, we used creating a more inclusive vibe, and bringing people in rather than keeping people out. And the next generation, the millennials and Gen Xers and so forth, they're driven by very different consuming behavior than baby boomers are. And they want to know how the sausage is made. You don't have to tell them everything, but they want to know that it's authentic, and they want to know that it's not bullshit, and they want to know that it's real. And
Jeff, we might have to beep that out. Oh my God.
Uh-oh.
This is a family program.
Where's your 14-second button or whatever it is? 7-second button.
I'm going to tell the editors, beep.
I'm just getting real. Actually, you have gotten the very sterile version of me. I'll tell you that.
That's funny. I didn't mean to interrupt. So.
That's quite all right. But those, just to kind of tie it up with a bow. So those elements, you have to be able to understand what the next generation wants and how they want to consume. And it's much more experiential. If you're not creating an experience where people can come and see it and taste it and touch it and hear it and understand it from the horse's mouth, then you're probably not going to be selling a lot of wine to the next generation. Mm-hmm. And then, wine has declined over the course of the last, how many ever years? I don't know, 8 or 10 years or so. You've seen a decline in wine consumption. No, exactly. Like, I think that I'm not, I think for certain brands that might be concerning. For a lot of people ask me, are you worried about the influence of cocktails and spirits and beer, because there's been an explosion in craft brewing and explosion of craft cocktails, and even marijuana, for example, is, a perceived threat. I'm not terribly worried about that. I'm not worried about it at all for quality brands. And the reason that I'm not terribly worried about it is that I just don't think that there is a better beverage on the face of the planet to marry with food than wine. Okay. And ultimately, the explosion in American food culture over the last 20 years or so will keep the wine industry tethered to it. And so I think that we experienced this back in the 80s when you had like wine coolers and things like that. Now you have seltzers and so forth, and those all introduce people to a different type of beverage and so forth. But I think once you get introduced to that, then all of a sudden you're like, well, what do I want to drink with a meal? And there is no better substitute than wine.
And might I add, nothing better than a Napa cab.
Rightly said.
Also, we've gone on so long that my dog is sitting here like, Mom, I want some attention. So
Cutie.
Levi.
Hey, Levi.
To wrap this up, your wine is definitely so special. Your story is special. Your place is special. Your wine has had a place on my holiday dinner tables and special occasion tables since the first time I was there.
That's awesome.
That's actually why I haven't opened this bottle yet, because it's a special one.
Please open it.
but I will be opening it. Justine, we will have to get out there for sure. Any other last thoughts, either of you?
We're Napa's back on its feet, and we're up and running. So if any of your guests or listeners are planning on heading out to Napa, it's an awfully beautiful place, and this is a great time, and we're open. So reach out to us. You can set up tours and tastings on our website, hourglasswine.com, and we'd love to entertain you.
Go see the cave. It's awesome.
We'd love to hear that, Jeff.
Thank you, guys. This has been really fun, and we really want you guys to come out.
We will. Yes.
This year.
And I promise. And this is Levi's first appearance on Credentialed, by the way.
I feel honored.
He's a fan of Hourglass as well.
That's great.
Listening, my dog has made his way onto my list. Well, thank you, Jeff Smith from Hourglass Wine, who has become a friend. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Credentialed.
Jillian, Justine, thank you for having me.